Good morning.
Good morning. So Michelle and I are going to talk about some of the things Ken has covered. But before we get into that, I just wanted to follow up. We always have a lot of fun out of this. Where are you from? I see so many new faces here. It's great to see new gardeners. And we like to talk about where have we been, because that affects how we look at gardening. Most of us learn to garden somewhere else, and we come here and things are different. I noticed that oftentimes the folks who are from California are a little bit bashful. To admit that as if we're bad. It's okay because, I moved here from California 10 years ago and built a house, and I have to tell you, I never looked back. I've gone back there. This summer I went to Lake Tahoe, stayed up there. It was great. Drove to the Bay Area to visit my son, and it took me 45 minutes just to get onto the Bay Bridge. I forgot how long it takes to get across, but then I stopped looking at the watch. But so I don't really miss that. I have to tell you that, though, I do really miss my Meyer lemon tree, which was a dwarf that thought it was a dwarf that was trying to become an orchard. And I also miss Dungeness crab and sourdough bread. But traffic jam, smog, whatever. So that kind of ties into Meyer lemon is a good example. We all love citrus, especially Meyer lemons, limes. It's great if you can grow them, and in many places you can. But you know what? You can't here. You cannot grow citrus. It will not make it through the frost, unfortunately. You can try growing them indoors and take them out in the summer, bring them in the winter. But one of the things we'll talk about today is what you can do, what you can still grow, like roses, and what things won't work. So we probably all had our favorite plants and grew up pruning the roses with grandma and that sort of thing. And that's great. That's the memory that we bring. We just have to adapt that to this environment. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, Ken mentioned these. Okay, we got soil. Soil is an issue. Climate, the differences in temperature, humidity or lack of. The seasons, the monsoon, cold weather in the winter. Animals are a constant challenge here. All kinds of animals that can and will eat your garden. And I had that experience in the last several months myself, so it happens. And then the changing of the seasons, how we grow, the alkalinity of the soil, all kinds of things. So, Michelle, what would you like to start out with?
First of all, like I said, we would like to welcome you. The first thing you need to know is it is not super easy to grow here. You can do it, and it gets frustrating at times, but it's a lot of fun as well. So just be patient. Patience is a virtue, as they say. And if you are patient, gardening is, you learn by your failures. So expect to have some failures and learn from them. And not everything is going to be perfect. You just gotta, that's where we're at. So the first thing we want to talk about is soil preparation. We have very high pH here. So you need to bring that pH down. There are several methods of doing that. So whether you add gypsum and sulfur to your soils, that'll help bring that down. Extra mulch when you're planting will help break down and it'll bring that acidity up so your pH comes down. Sulfur is one of the best things to do. Also know that your water also has a high level, so it's something you have to be aware of all the time. Our fertilizer actually has that sulfur in it, so we recommend that you do that 3 times a year. For all your deciduous stuff, your evergreens, we do 4 times a year. You want to tell them when to fertilize?
We fertilize, we try to pick out dates during the year that will help us. So we start out with Easter. That's the spring feeding, Easter. Then 4th of July is the summer feeding.
It also comes with monsoon, so it washes it in, so you don't have to water it in.
Yeah. Then we have Halloween for the fall feeding. And then wintertime it can be New Year's Day. It works well. Now, one of the things that Michelle talked about as far as alkaline soil, we have plants here that are acid-loving plants. And those can include, we've got a rhododendron here, there's some beautiful camellias, blueberries, azaleas, hydrangeas. A lot of those are going to struggle if you just put them in the ground and don't do anything, because they like an acidic soil and we have an alkaline soil. So you have the amendments, you have sulfur that you can add. Our mulch and potting the soil are well balanced, so they will help with that pH. And in fact, many people prefer to grow some of these plants in containers. As Ken mentioned, some of us struggle. Our yards don't really have good soil. Well, container gardening is a whole other class that we do, and it's a whole other way that you can control raised beds. You can control the soil. You don't have to worry about, in my yard, anytime I think about planting something new, I realize I'm going to be digging into rock after just a short period of time. So I don't plant anything unless there's already had been something there and that the soil has been worked and some of the rocks have been removed. So think in terms of, for those acid-loving plants, control, increase the acidity as much as you can, and think in terms of container gardening as well as putting things into the ground.
So talking soil preparation, if you were going to plant this plant, if you're going to do it yourself, you want to dig your hole 2 or 3 times as wide, and you want this plant to be just as deep as the top of the soil. If you're going to err, you want to go up. You want it about a 1/2 inch above the ground, or even. If you find yourself going lower, you want to make sure and it sounds like you're doing the wrong thing, but you want to pack that bottom part down, because if this sinks, this plant's going to drown, because you're going to drown the crown. When we go out to plant, we dig the hole 3 times as wide, just as deep. We mix 2/3 natural soil to 1/3 mulch. The natural soil, they have to learn how to live here. You're not going to change the soil in all your backyard. So you need to make sure that the first year or 2 that you give it a little bit of space so it can get strong, healthy roots. So when it does get to the nasty stuff, it'll be able to survive the rest of that clay, caliche, rock, and everything else that we have. Yep.
So adding to that, there are some other things that folks do around here when they're not sure about the drainage in their yard. And this is an issue depending on where you live. In Prescott Valley, you may have a clay backyard, and more often than not, plants suffer here because of too much water rather than not enough. And too much water can also be caused by poor drainage. So one of the practices that you can do here, and we recommend it, is, let's say you picked out a spot and you've got a shrub or a tree you want to plant, dig a hole to the full size, pull all the dirt out of there, and then fill that hole up with water. And if there's water still standing there the next day, you don't want to plant there, because it's telling you, that outcome of that test is telling you that the water is not going to drain properly, the plant is going to just drown there, will not be able to survive. A couple of summers ago, we had a gentleman that came in, he said he did that test, he was planting on a big tree, he dug a big hole, poured the water in there, 2 days later it was still there. He decided, okay, this is probably not a good place to plant a tree. However, I could maybe get some trout and stock this. But But if that water has drained well, then you're in good shape. And then another thing that I was reading about this recently that some folks recommend is you take that plant and you soak it so that the root ball is completely saturated before you put it in there. The whole is saturated. Then you mix in the mulch with the native soil according to the ratio that Michelle talked about. And then, we mix in with fertilizer, our own mulch, and then you're helping the plant to get off to a good start. Because if you have a spot where there's not going to drain properly, the plant is just not going to be successful. It may just kind of hang in there for a couple of years. Eventually, it's just not going to thrive. And so all these factors can help us determine if this is a good spot or not. By the same token that people say, oh gosh, I have 2 plants that died in this very same spot, I usually tell them then don't plant anything else in it because there's probably some problem going on there. We don't know what it is. I mean, I had this experience with my sister-in-law, same thing. She bought a plant here, asked me to come plant it for her. I pulled out the old dead plant and the root ball was just dripping wet. And all around the hole was this terracotta wall. And obviously there just was no drainage there. But on the other hand, the rest of the yard was doing really well. So like right here, you could have a spot where there's clay, and over here, 10, 15 feet away, trees are thriving, everything's fine. And so it's learning about your property and learning where you can plant and where you best, should try something else. Should we talk about the seasons?
Yes.
So when springtime comes, we have, I think Ken maybe mentioned this, we generally suggest to folks that for your summer flowers and vegetables, you don't plant them in the ground until after Mother's Day. That's usually near the end of May. And a couple things happen here in the springtime if you haven't been through a spring season. The wind starts blowing, and it's this prevailing southwesterly wind, and you wonder at times, is it ever going to stop? It's not really good for the plants. So if you take summer plants like tomatoes, basil, squash, eggplant, and put them in the ground because we have a nice day in April, they may or may not even survive. And so that's why we recommend that you wait maybe another whole month in the climate around here. Because what will happen is that wind, especially after the weather warms up, it's so dry and hot, it's just not good for the plants. I mean, I've had the experience of growing a whole bed of basil, and I nurse it along through May and June, and it does okay, it's not doing too much, and I'm watering it every day. And then July comes along, and it starts raining. And some of these plants, they're really tropical plants, some of these vegetables. They love the humidity, they really start to go. We can pour water on our plants every single day, but we can't give them the humidity. And so in the summertime, in the late spring, early summer, we have low humidity weather every single day. So the hot, dry wind, if there's any way you can shield plants from that, then be aware that that is one of the issues here, the wind, the lack of humidity. And the fact that, back to these vegetables, 50 degrees at night, that's the nighttime temperature that these vegetables would like before they're going to thrive. So you might have a beautiful day, 65 degrees, people get really excited, okay, I'm going to plant the tomatoes, then whoops, all of a sudden we have a night and it's 35. And the plants could die. I mean, it happens, people have to replace everything. And so that's something to be aware of, the climate.
You can plant that if you're brave. Just know that you're going to have to protect. There are products that wells of water, there's frost cloth that you can use that'll add about 5 degrees of temperature to that plant, but it's going to struggle. So, I mean, if you're brave, go ahead and try it. Just know that you're going to have to help it along a little bit.
Is that only true for the higher, like I'm a lower elevation than Prescott?
You probably got an extra week or so. And a lot of times that is great. But if you're in a cold valley, cold air settles. So if you're up on a hillside, you're going to be warmer than you are down in the valley. So just kind of keep that that in mind. We are zone 7 here. When you were looking for plants, regular plants, kind of keep that zone 7 in mind. The lower the number, the more cold it can take. This winter has been, I guess, typical, because typically we get down in that 10 degrees, 5 degrees. Last winter, if you were here, I don't think we got below 20. I mean, we had a really warm, dry, drought-infested winter, so.
In terms of zone 7, I've also come across like heat zone maps. Do you have what this area is rated for heat zone?
Her question was heat zone. I'm not completely familiar with that, but most plants will have 5 through 9. If that's the case, you're fine. Because 9, you're closer to Phoenix. So if it's like a 6 or 6 through 8, know that your tolerance for heat is not going to be as strong. You might need to put it in a little bit of shade in the afternoon where your temperatures, you're not going to fry a plant. Say for instance, this rhodie, he needs shade. I guess while I'm at that, be careful when you're reading tags. These tags are made for across the country. We have a couple of elements that make us a little bit different. We are a mile high. We have that altitude. We're closer to the sun. So we have that intense sunshine that's going to fry that plant if you put it out in the sunshine. And it says full sun on it. So just be careful when you're reading tags. Ask a professional or get to know your plants a little bit better.
So following up on this cold hardiness, it is really important to take a look at the tags. Most of these Monrovia tags will tell you whether the plant wants full sun or it'll do okay in the shade. It'll also give you that zone and tell you, okay, it's good down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. One thing to be cautious of, since you were asking about heat rating and so on, these numbers, this zone rating is for the USDA, Department of Agricultural Zone Rating. If you look at your Sunset Gardening book, they've got a whole other numbering system. And I was reading that book yesterday. It's a wonderful book, but just be cautious because it can be kind of confusing. They talk about zones in Alaska like that are 1D, and I'm thinking, what is that? I don't know what that is. So we to standardize everything, it's really important to look at those tags, get information about the plant. What size is it going to be? Does it allow sun or shade? And how low can it handle temperature? Most everything here, with the exception of annuals and vegetables, our plants are, we only bring in plants that we think are going to do well here. And so we're not going to bring in plants that will say, oh, go 30 degrees and then it'll die. Most of these plants here that we have a cold hardiness that goes down to at least 0. And if it's below 0, if the weather here gets below 0, we should probably move back to wherever we came from. It's been kind of chilly this winter, but it hasn't gotten below 0 as far as I know.
And that being said, don't be afraid to, some of them will come in at an 8 or a 9. They're an annual. Just know that you're buying an annual. It's gorgeous. We get bougainvilleas in. They look great on a patio, Just know that you're going to replace it or you're going to cut it back really far and bring it in the house. So work with what colors and plant materials that you want to work with. Just know you're going to have to do things a little bit differently.
And part of that too is learning about your yard. I think Ken mentioned this, that most of us in our yards, we have little microclimates, maybe up against a wall, that the sun warms up the little stones in the daytime. And maybe something there could thrive that you might not normally think of. So think about microclimates. We'll have them on the north side of the house. I have some aspens growing and they get some shade, a little bit cooler weather, and they do well as a result. And then in the front, there's a lot of sun reflecting off the stones. So microclimates, this is something that we learn after a period of time, learn about our yards. Where does the sun shine throughout the year? and what plants are going to do well there, and using the tags and the information about zones as a general guideline.
So to go back to planting, cool season crops start coming in March. So your lettuce, cabbage, beets, that type of thing come in March and April. We do start bringing in tomatoes mid-April into May. There is a transition time for all that stuff. If you have them in a nice warm spot, you don't want to just take them straight outside. You're going to need to temper them a little bit to get them outdoors. Spring fruit trees right now is a great time to get fruit trees. We have a ton of apples right now. We just got a truck. I saw all this stuff right here is all brand new. All this stuff is brand new. So apples, pears, peaches, apricots. What am I missing?
Plums.
Plums.
Blue-nuts. Almonds.
Yes.
Walnuts.
Pears. Pomegranates. They actually do well here.
Avocado.
No. You tried to trick me.
No eucalyptus.
Figs do well. Watch your zone and know that you're going to need to hit them in a warmer spot in your yard. Most of them are zone 7. There are a few that are zone 8. So you'll want to find that microclimate that Doug was talking about to keep that one good. A lot of people will actually, I've seen them insulate them from the trunk up. Next.
So some of you asked about animals in the garden, and as Ken mentioned, there's an entire class on gophers and moles. But I should tell you that between deer, rabbits, javelina, and the underground pests, gardening can be a challenge. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, you just have to be aware. And it's not always the same thing. We have these lists of rabbit-proof and deer-proof plants and javelina-proof plants, and I have them in the pocket of my apron. And but that doesn't always work. Somehow or other we can't get the animals to read these lists and pay attention to them. And so, for example, for the first time in 10 years, I had javelina came and ate all my pansies. And I mean, they don't just come along and munch them, right? They dig them up. If they don't like something, they'll still dig it up and leave a mess. And so finally, I just got tired of every morning scraping, sweeping up potting soil, putting it back in. I said, that's it. They've eaten all the flowers. If they come back, they're going to eat more of them. You have to think in terms of, if you've got a fence, that's great. You can keep out deer and javelina, usually. I have a neighbor who's a real serious gardener, and she had this wonderful big bed of rock, and she had all these tulips growing in there. And when they were just doing beautifully, the javelina came along, and they got up on their back legs, front legs up like a dog, and they ate every single tulip bulb in that bed, and in the process made a complete mess of it. But this neighbor, Fran, she wasn't going to be deterred by that. She just had a guy come and help her, and they added about 1.5 foot of stone, putting in new soil, and she's back to gardening there. So not everybody can do that, but as we talked about, there are certain plants, the herbal plants, that usually animals don't like those, and that's rosemary, lavender, sage, basil. The taste is too strong, the smell. I had javelina came in, they attacked my tomato plant, and they went into a whole bed of basil, and I'd hidden one little pepper plant in the middle. Well, that didn't matter to them. They just went in there, yanked out the pepper plant, did not touch any of the basil whatsoever. So they know what they like, and if they don't know, they're going to explore. And by that I mean, they can just dig up. So if you've got a fence, you have to make sure it's really secure at the ground, because they have a really amazing power to root something up. They can dig up enough to just cause damage. So we have all kinds of products that can help, but just be aware and try and find out and learn what's going on in your yard. Do you see deer? Do you see javelina? Chances are if you see them, it's an ancient trail. They've been walking through here forever. In the springtime, you see a lot of rabbits. Rabbits can eat a yard, a whole vegetable garden. I have a lot of coyotes in my neighborhood. I'm wondering, where are they when the rabbits are eating my garden? These rabbits are fat and plump. They'd be a nice meal. Usually, though, if you have coyotes, and who doesn't, they're all over the United States now practically, they're going to stay away from your yard. They'll go after your dog and your cat. That's another thing I know it's not really gardening related, but if you're new here, be very cautious about leaving small pets outdoors, especially at night, because coyote can come in and that will be the end of that pet. So, yes?
Coyotes, hawks, eagle, owls, small pets, not good.
So everybody hear that? There are the flying animals can come in and take away your pet. I think my cats are big enough now that I don't think I have to worry about that. They're pretty well-fed animals, but it's something to be cautious of. And they're not going to destroy your landscaping, but they may come in and they can do some damage to your pets. Yes, ma'am.
Bobcats, is there something that they particularly like?
Bobcats. The question was, what about bobcats? Mountain lions or whatever.
So, is there anything that they like or don't like? Or?
Typically, they're going to stay away from your plants.
Repeat the question just for the folks
Sorry.
on Facebook.
The question was about bobcats. What about bobcats? Do they do any damage in the yard? And Michelle's answer.
Typically, no. They're meat eaters, so that they're looking for that type of thing.
So they could eat mice, rodents. They can take care of some of the things that you don't especially want in your yard.
Yeah.
What else do we need to cover? Okay, so we're going to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's. Yeah. And by the way, feel free to ask questions.
Well, I don't know. I'd keep
focused
focused and wait till the end, or you'll run out of. They'll train roll over you.
Okay. Well, let's
You're
work this one
engaged.
question.
Speaking of coyotes and javelina, I went on the Prescott community page and a lot of gardeners on there said to keep the javelina off your plants to use coyote urine. And is that true? And if so, how would that affect your plants?
Well, okay. So the
And where do
question.
you get it? Besides milking a coyote.
You can just round them up and give them a little food. So.
Repeat the question. Make sure you repeat.
The question was about, can you use coyote urine to deter javelina and other pests? And, well, I think the question is yes and no, because, when it comes down to it, there are so many homegrown recipes. Some of them really work well, some not so much. And I don't know, if you went to the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension, they might say, well, there's no science to back that up. So therefore, they don't think it really works necessarily, or they can't endorse it per se. I don't know where you would get coyote urine.
I think somebody on the thing, but there were like 3 gardeners that swore by it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think maybe Cabela's or something. I don't know.
Right, but I don't think I'd want to put that on my plants.
I know, that's
But you
what
can try and create a perimeter. Some people will do that, a perimeter of something, like maybe the bobcat.
Electric fences really work the best, especially for your javelina and that type of thing. Javelina have a trail that they usually all the time.
Right through my property.
Yeah.
We were over at Ken's house and they had a trail. He put an electric fence that was about 1.5 feet, 2 foot high. Low voltage, a little bit of peanut butter to entice them. The javelina don't go through there anymore. So, a little bit of deterrent, they'll find a new way of going around.
If you do want coyote or wolf urine, I bought wolf urine and it doesn't work.
No.
It
Doesn't
just
work.
smells pretty bad, but it doesn't work real well. But you can get it online, go to any trapper. People do trap, they sell it.
We used to sell coyote urine here. I can't believe I came down to this low level, but I used to sell pee in a bottle, and it doesn't work. There's no consistency with it, so I wouldn't even waste my energy or money.
I'm glad
It evaporates off too fast.
Okay.
It works for like 3 days and then doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, don't waste your money.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the products that we carry here, and Michelle's going to tell us about some of the things that we have here.
We're going to start with this. I don't know if everybody's seen all if anybody was here last July when the monsoons hit, the weeds just went exploded. There are 2 times in the year that you want to put the weed ornamental grass stopper down. Now is the perfect time to get it down. This basically keeps the seeds from germinating, so you don't get those weeds. So get it down now, and you'll save a whole bunch of finger when you're trying to spray all your broadleaf weeds. The other time of year you want to do this is in June, right before the monsoons hit. If you get it down in those 2 time frames, you'll have a whole lot less weeds. Will you have a weed? Yeah, you're going to have a weed, but you're not going to have as many.
Is it safe for animals?
Once it's dry, this is a product that needs to be wet down, so a lot of people will buy it right before it rains. Get it down, let it rain through. Once it's dry, your pets can walk on it.
Oh, okay.
You do want to keep all products up on a shelf where they can't get to it. Even the fertilizer that's pet friendly, if a dog eats it, a lot of it, it will harm them.
Can you see what that is again?
Ornamental weed and grass stopper. It's a granular product. You can put it on with a spreader.
So that's known as a pre-emergent product. So what it does, it kills the weeds, prevents them from germinating and coming up. It's not going to do anything for the weeds you have on the ground already. But if you put it in now, because pretty soon springtime weeds are going to come up, put this in and it'll prevent a lot of those from coming up. I've been using this for years, and I believe that there's kind of a cumulative effect that you can achieve, so that every year, I know the areas where I get a lot of weeds across from a weedy yard across the street, that kind of thing. That's where I broadcast it most heavily, or water it in really well, or let it rain, and then it helps to keep
That's
the
okay,
weeds,
Michelle.
keep the weeds away.
So can I use it in my rose bed? Can I use it around my fruit trees? Can I use it through my evergreen hedge bed? Or
This is safe for around pets. That's why it's called ornamental. You can put it in that area. You can put it in rocks, anywhere that you need weed prevention.
What is the shelf life on these things? If you buy, you have a lot. After a couple years, do you throw it out? Is it still good? What?
Her question is, how long does the potency last? Usually a couple of years is fine. If it's a liquid product, you want to keep it from freezing. If it freezes, then it's toast. Sulfur? You can put it on here.
you brought the big bag.
Sulfur is for color, and it also brings down that pH that we were talking about earlier. Your blue spruce, your autumn glazed maples, all that stuff that have fall color, you want to do it in springtime and you want to do it in the fall, just to keep that color magnificent. Sulfur actually does lower that pH, so it helps balance your soil in that area. Calcium nitrate, we have two products that do the same thing. We brought this in as a smaller bag, but this does the same thing as gypsum does. It actually breaks up clay. It is all, there's nitrogen and calcium in here. So it's also great for tomatoes. It keeps that blossom and rot from happening.
Remember we talked about fertilizing and how many times during the year you want to fertilize. This is the fertilizer that we carry. It's an all-purpose fertilizer, 744. It's an organic, slow-release product, and it's something that you can, beauty of it, I think, is that you can use it on everything in your yard. So when it's time, maybe it's Easter, fall, whatever the time is to fertilize, I take a 20-pound bag, we have 10 and 20-pound bags, put it in a bucket, and I just walk around and I just sort of sprinkle it. So that rhododendron, we might get 2 handfuls. But my aspen trees, maybe they'll get 3 or 4 because they're a little bit bigger. If you want to get more precise, there are instructions here on how many ounces per tree trunk thickness and so on. And some people like to follow that. For me, that's like too much math to do in the garage. And so I have what I call the Johnny Appleseed method. And most people that I talk to about this say, I like that. The truth is it works. I've been using this for years. My trees have never looked better. So a quick walk around the yard, you can keep your arm loose. And I just, 20 pounds, I decided I'm not going to save anything. I'm going to use all 20 pounds, get to the end of the bucket. Maybe I'll rinse a little bit of it in just to wet it so the wind doesn't blow it away. But it's something that really works, and it does so well. And it's slow release so that it's not just like a one-shot deal. It's a really good product. Yes, ma'am.
When's a good time to fertilize like your trees, your aspens, and stuff like that?
All those are the dates that I talked about, like Easter, 4th of July. So you just go around and do everything all at once. And you can put this in your flowers, your vegetable garden. I like the idea of one time all the way through, then I know I've fertilized for the season. And you don't have to worry about fertilizer for this, something else for a different type of plant, and so on.
We always tell you just to remember your holidays.
We can also attach the 4-step fertilizer plan. We can email that to you all. That would be of help. So kind of tells you the dates and what to do and when, how much.
Yes, ma'am? Our question was iron content of the soil, and I'm not a scientist, but the way pH works, it keeps whatever minerals and all that stuff that's in the soil, the plants can't uptake, which is why we enhance. They just can't suck it up.
Do we know if iron or what do we need to add or not worry about it?
We're high in iron. There's natural iron deposits every place. You rarely, if ever, I never put iron on my gardens ever because there's so much iron in your soil. I do put the sulfur on every year to lower the pH so the iron that's there is available. So sorry to steal those
No, that's
thunder.
okay. I don't have to, I'm not a scientist.
When do you put the sulfur? You said every year, but when?
Her question was, when do you put the sulfur on? You do it twice a year, usually in the springtime and in the fall.
So spring would be
Yeah.
after May? Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Well, between now and March, I mean, we're really close right now. Yeah. Yes,
Are
ma'am.
these also for the native plants?
Her question was about native plants. Do you use all this stuff? Native plants, not so much. Your yuccas and the plants that you plant, once a year is usually plenty for them. They don't need a lot. They don't take up a lot. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I have brand new bare root trees, aspen and the autumn blaze. Can I fertilize them? They came to me at 3 to 4 feet tall, literally sticks. They have a decent root structure, but I'm a little nervous about giving them fertilizer since they're at this beginning stage.
Okay, so the question was about, is it okay to fertilize bare root, aspens, and some other trees that you have? And I would say you should fertilize them when you plant them. And by the way, if we have specific questions about things, Michelle and I can talk with you one-on-one after the class. We'll also be happy to show you around what we have and answer any questions about existing plants. So the
You look like a rock star, Doug.
we have an equipment problem here.
Our root and grow and our mulch are kind of a double duo. So when you plant, you want to, again, 2/3 natural soil, 1/3 mulch, the premium mulch. We've made our own product, so it works really well here. The root and grow helps stimulate those fine hair roots and gets the plant a good start. You'll also put fertilizer when you plant a new plant. Ours is a very even number. It's a 744. Slow release, so it won't burn your plants. And this, you just mix 3 tablespoons per gallon of water. Usually when I plant something, I make sure it's very well watered, and then the last watering can has this in it. If you put it on when it's dry, it's just going to get soaked out into the dry part. All seasons dormant oil. For those of you that have fruit trees, this is the product that you want to get now. The way this dormant oil works is you're going to coat all your fruit trees, actually all your trees, because little aphids and all that stuff have gone through, laid eggs, and they're just sitting there waiting to hatch. So as soon as we get warm, they're going to start hatching out, and you're going to have a tree full of thrips or aphids or that type of thing. What this does is it's an oil-based product. It'll coat your branching, and it'll suffocate anything that's still on your tree.
Even bark beetle?
I'm sorry?
Even bark beetle, or you use something else for bark beetle?
Her question was about bark beetle, and yes, you do use something else for bark beetle.
This is after pruning?
Yes, sir. As long as it's dormant, this is what you use. Dormant oil, all seasons, horticulture and dormant oil. The other use for this, for those that have apple trees, this is great for coddling moth. Anybody ever have the apples with the brown little holes in them all the time? The coddling moth actually lays eggs in the flowers. So you want to spray them as your petals are losing, well, as the flowers are losing your petals, you'll spray your flowers with this, and it'll kill your eggs that are on there. Okay, I think we've done the products. Let's get to the fun stuff. As Ken kind of mentioned earlier when we were just chit-chatting, this weather we have right now is great for pansies. They love the cold. It can snow 6 inches, and as soon as it dries or melts, these guys are going to say, "Whoo, look at me." So they do really well. So if you have a container, you want to pop a color, you want spring to come really soon, this is what you want to put in your pots. Ornamental cabbage, kale, are gorgeous. They give you that pop of color, and they just sit there, and they're really pretty. So just keep, for containers and such, these will do you until the really pretty stuff comes in April and May.
And then they die.
And then they die. But they are an annual. You want to start? You want me to start?
How about the rhododendron?
I'll be Vanna.
This rhododendron is a beautiful plant, and some of you may have grown them in other parts of the country where there's a lot of moisture and acidity in the soil. So again, this is one where either a container growing or plenty of sulfur in your soil will help. It's also a plant that likes to be in the shade, so be careful. Our afternoon sun here in the middle of summer can really be intense for some plants. And so the rhododendron is a bit more of a shade-loving plant. And the companions, of course, are azaleas. You've probably seen those and grown them in many places. But just remember, shade and acidic soil are the two important things for that plant.
Hey Doug, take your microphone and just put it down towards your mouth. We didn't quite hear that. There you go.
Okay.
Michelle, help him out, will you?
Okay.
Put that plant. I mean, help him with his microphone. Typical man. There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
This just going to stay on my ear.
So how much do we need to repeat?
You're okay. Go, yeah.
Rhododendron, that's all I know, right?
This is a rhododendron.
That's, I didn't hear any of it, but you shade, right?
Afternoon shade, it can do some morning sun. If you guys decide to buy something today, I would kind of be careful because this stuff just came in. So let it temper a little bit, get used to being in our climate before you put it straight outside. The buds are nice and tight, so you won't get blooms for another 3 or 4 weeks, but it's going to be gorgeous for you.
So will that live from year to year?
Her question was, will this live from year to year? Absolutely, yeah. Going to get about 5 feet tall.
Question about azaleas or rhododendrons, poisonous to animals?
I don't know the answer to that.
All right, legally we have to say check with your veterinarian.
Gotcha.
That's, yeah.
But yeah, animals, I've got them right out there where javelina are. They don't eat them.
Okay,
So
I'm talking
it's-
about dog.
Which means probably it's got something in it that they don't
Yeah,
like.
okay.
We did have a question online that says dormant oil, will it harm my dog? Question mark.
Again, no, just let it dry. Once a product is dry, I mean, unless your dog's gonna lap up the tree, it won't harm them. So
It's
just,
all organic.
yeah, just kind of keep an eye on your pets.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I will go there then work well in a pot.
Her question was, will a rhododendron work well in a pot? And yes, it will.
Exceptionally.
And what you can do is plant it in our potting soil, which is a much more balanced soil, so you don't have to worry about the pH. From time to time, you can add sulfur, but it's something that it's easier to control the acidity of the soil, and so yes, it is a good plant to grow in a pot.
This is one of my favorite plants in town. This is a ketchup and mustard rose. We just got 125, I think, fiber pots, dormant roses. Great time to get roses in. They do great here. It's one of the plants that you really don't have to fuss a lot. I mean, you do fertilize, occasionally take care of a bug or a fungus or two, but they do really, really well. And we have a ton of different colors. So take a look. These are all down in the lower house. So keep an eye on roses. Yes, ma'am?
Sunshade mix.
These do great. Somebody asked, her question was sunshade mix. Somebody asked about sun-loving plants. These are it. They'll do great in the sun.
Yes, ma'am.
Do gophers love them?
Yeah.
Gophers?
Gophers and roses,
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah. They've never bothered mine. I should tell you, back to roses before we leave roses, one of the things that's really exciting here is that in April, we get maybe 1 or 2 truckloads of roses that come in. It's quite an event, and they're all out there. We struggle to find room for them. They're out in the parking lot, unload 2 trucks. Some of them are on pallets that are about 10 feet high. As we take them down and try and figure out how to best organize them, is it by variety, is it by color? We put them in rows, and people come in, and they just come right to the area where you're working, and they say, okay, I want that one, that one. I said, great, I don't have to worry about that. I had too many for that row anyway. And so it's really great. And as Michelle said, roses do really well here. You don't have to mulch them during the winter time. Mine still actually have a few flowers or leaves on them. And spring, usually March, is a good time to prune them. But roses do well. I have 3 in my front yard. They're right outside the front door. And I have a Mr. Lincoln. And this summer, Mr. Lincoln, I think, decided it was going to be taller than the former president, right? And I'm like this. I said, okay, that's enough. I want my roses to be about this level so I can see them. So I had a little talk with Mr. Lincoln, and he's going to be, Mr. Lincoln's going to be a pretty major pruning this in March. But roses can do really well here. They love the climate. They'll hang on to flowers and leaves until even November, December. And in the springtime, they just come out like crazy, and they can blossom several times during the year. So they're a great choice. And we have climbing roses, we have ground covers, we have shrubs, and we have all kinds.
Yes.
If we have a rose or a rhododendron in a pot and want to leave it out year round, how much do we have to worry about it freezing in the winter?
His question was, a rhododendron or a rose in a pot, how much do you have to worry about freezing? If you're going to plant a big shrub in a pot, you want to go with a fairly decent sized pot. The bigger the pot, the less likely it is going to be to freeze. Again, it kind of rule of thought or thumb. If we get super cold, just put a few blankets around it, you know? I mean, keep an eye on the weather, work a little bit for your plants, but it'll be fine.
Rhododendrons go down to minus 20 degrees. Maybe minus 40. Some crazy cold. They don't freeze. So I've got one that's been in a pot for years. Roses, I've got I think Knockout. It's been a rose forever. I ignore it. If it dies, I almost want it to die. I'm tired of it. I want a new one. And it just keeps living. So, but I have pots about that big. To 18 to 24 inch, 18, 20 inch. Bigger's better for shrubs. That's where we can talk sidebar with you and help you exact with that.
Yes, sir.
I've been used to, in the past, pruning all of my hybrid teas and stuff. This year I tried climbing roses. Now it doesn't seem right to prune climbing roses because then they don't climb, right? So what do you do with those to keep them safe for the winter? You have a pruner or?
His question was about climbing roses and whether you need to prune. I would wait just to see how far. You'll know if you need to prune because you'll have this brown stick and it'll die back, and then you just prune to that point if it's damaged. If it doesn't have that brown on it, it isn't damaged, so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next plant, this is a Purus, Lily of the Valley. This is another shade-loving plant, so afternoon shade is what this guy likes. But it is an evergreen, so if you need some green, you have some shelter, whether there are trees or on the north side of your house, these guys do great. Really pretty white flowers. These guys come in a bunch of different varieties. Some are smaller, some are bigger. There's a mountain fire one that comes in that has really beautiful red leaves on it. So really cool plant.
How big will that get?
This one specific, 3 to 4 feet. If you put it in a pot, you can kind of control the size.
Pieris or Lily of the Valley. It's a common name.
Next plant that we have here is it's called a broom, and we have Scotch brooms and Spanish broom from time to time. This one's called all gold, I think, all gold broom. And the thing that's neat about this is that most of the year it's like this. It's just sort of like an evergreen, looks like a green whatever. Yeah. And then at some point in the summertime, they start to flower, mostly yellow. And people will come in here and they'll bring a cutting or they'll have a photograph and they'll say, I was downtown and I saw these everywhere and they're incredible and they're flowering. And I say, come on over here to the broom section. I know what that is. And so it's just something that, puts out this, I don't know if you can see this tag here, this proliferation of just massive yellow.
And they smell amazing.
Yeah, they're amazing. And the rest of the year, you don't have to do too much. I've seen these growing in empty lots where it doesn't seem as though anyone's paying attention to them. And of course, in some parts of the country, they're kind of invasive. Not really a problem here, but I understand some places, like in the Northwest, they grow too quickly, but here, they just look pretty and everybody is happy. So they don't have to worry about bulldozing. You won't have to worry about that in the Prescott area.
Sun or shade?
Full sun.
Full sun?
This plant is one of my favorites. It's a ground cover, and it's called Kinnikinick. Gets about 6-8 feet wide, so it's a great evergreen ground cover. It has pink flowers that bloom in the spring. Beautiful red limbs. So this is a great one if you need to fill a lot of space and you don't want to buy a lot of plants. Usually, her question was about javelina. Usually they stay away from them. Usually.
and they're really hardy plants. They can handle the cold really well. I know that because yesterday in reading my sunset book, it talked about how these plants, these kinnikinics, do well in certain areas in Alaska, around Fairbanks. You know, they have little banana belts and microclimates there where it isn't all freezing all the time. Yes, ma'am.
The animals bother the roses.
Say that again?
Various animals
Eat the roses? Her question was, do animals eat roses? Yes, they do. If you have deer, even javelina, rabbits, they will eat roses. We're hoping this year, because we've been so wet, that there's a lot of abundance of food out there for them. We've noticed a decline in people saying, the deer came in and ate everything. So it is, you know, depending on the year, some deer eat more than others. Little fences, again, there are products. We have a whole thing on this on a different class. If you guys take a look around, take a walk around when this class is done, we just brought in a whole bunch of dormant shrubs that are fixing to start blooming. This is a forsythia, beautiful yellow flowers. They'll bloom through March. You won't get any leaves, it'll just be flowers, so it's a really pretty plant. Again, there are a few different sizes. Hey, Vincent.
Hey, Benny. How you doing, big man?
So one of the things that you learn as you grow different plants in your garden is the idea of being able to have something going on, some flowering all through the year. So these forsythias are really early bloomers.
Come on through.
And at the other end of the spectrum, the pampas grass, which are all pruned now, they come out in September with those long shoots. And so it's really nice to be able to have something going on most of the time. And then, of course, in the wintertime, your deciduous shrubs and trees will lose their leaves, but you still have your evergreens, and you can have your pansies. But that's something to think about. Here's an early bloomer. Other plants bloom later on. Other plants like lantana and crepe myrtle, we don't even get them here practically until the weather is really hot. They're warm weather loving plants. And so you get that succession going on. It isn't just one big burst in the spring. It's something going on all through the season.
And since this is a newcomer class, the way we do things here is we do bring things in when it's time for them to bloom. So the spring loving plants, if you like them, now's the time to get them, because if you come back in the summer, we probably won't have them. So keep that seasonality in the back of your head so you know when things come in.
So they have a question online that says, do hostas and peonies grow here? So,
Hold that thought.
okay.
Okay, so this is a hawthorn, and it's an evergreen plant. It has beautiful flowers, nice hedge, beautiful shrub that you can place anywhere in your yard, sun-loving plant, and we have several different varieties of that. And so, do we want to? I like that question about that came online. Peonies, yes, they do well here, but they
That's a bucket of dirt.
It is a bucket of dirt, but it is a peony. If you digged around in here, you'd find the little buds. We do have some, and they do look like a bucket of dirt. But if you get these in right now, they will be happy as a clam in a couple of weeks. Full sun, partial shade, they're fine with. The question about hostas, they are a shade-loving plant here. I'm sorry? More than usual. Her question was about water. Hostas do need a lot of water. But not... Watering here is one of those things that you don't have to water as often as you think you do. New plants, you're going to water them the most the first year than you'll ever need to any other time. So once they're established, once a week usually is all you need to water. The smaller the plant, the more often you probably have to water. But we have a planting guide, so anytime you guys buy something, we're going to give you that, and it'll tell you exactly step by step how to plant it, how to water it on the back. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Another question over here?
I was told with the peonies that they bloom right when it's windy and the wind knocks the blooms off. Is that kind of stuff to keep it somewhere very sheltered?
Her question was about the wind blowing the flowers down. Peonies are one of those plants anyway that you want to stake. So as soon as I plant something like this, I always set it up with staking. You can actually take a string and 4 sets of little posts and just kind of make a grid out of it. Let the leaves kind of grow through it, and it'll be fine.
Are the peonies tasty to the javelina?
No.
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 You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. We're almost done. Okay. This is an eastern snowball. It's a viburnum. This is one of your larger shrubs. I'm going to get in that 6-7 foot tall range. Gorgeous white snowball flowers in the springtime. They go great with the lilacs and that type of flower. Beautiful green foliage throughout the summer. Nice if you need a larger shrub. And then the two of the last plants that we have for you are lilacs. We just got a shipment of lilacs in. Again, this is a great time to get these in the ground. This is a blue meringue lilac. The cool thing about this is it's going to bloom 2 or 3 times this year instead of that one time in the spring. With this blue meringue, it's also a smaller one, so it's only going to get in that 4 to 5 foot range. Once it does bloom, you'll want to trim it down, because that's when you do any of your cutbacks on anything that blooms in the spring. You want to cut it back as soon as it's done. Fertilize once you do trim it, and that'll get that second batch of blooms going for you. Sun, full sun. They can do a little bit of partial shade if you need to, but full sun.
When you say 4 to 5 feet, are you talking height or width?
Both. Usually your shrubs are going to go this way and that way. There are a few that are more columnar, but usually it's height and width. And this is a brand new lilac that we just brought in. It's called Josie. Cool thing about this is it says it's a continual bloomer. I'm really curious to see what that actually means. Pretty purple pink flowers, same fragrance as regular lilac, but now's a great time to get these guys in the ground.
How big will that grow?
4 to 5 feet tall and wide, so it's a dwarf as well. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is we just received a shipment of these gorgeous, beautiful weeping cherry trees. These are one of those smaller ornamental trees. If you don't have a lot of space, this is a great thing to put in. Beautiful pink flowers. This one's actually a double, so you're going to have some really gorgeous flowers. Say that again?
It's ornamental.
Yeah, her question was, is it ornamental? And yes, it is.
Yeah, so no fruit.
No fruit. Huh?
So this is no
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. So just in general, I wanted to talk about whenever you come in here, there's always someone here to speak with you. Michelle and I are here, or Ken. Everyone here is knowledgeable. We pride ourselves on understanding what we have here, trying to answer your questions. Another thing that we do is if you have a problem, a bug, an infestation of some kind, if you bring a little cutting in, we have a microscope and it projects up onto a computer screen. We can take a look at it. We may not always have the answer, but we can say, look, we think it's this, and I bet you this product will work for that. That's something that's available to us. I think we mentioned before we have a delivering planting service. So we have a crew that will come out and plant whatever you bought here. I've heard nothing but praise from them, from customers who come back and say, these guys were great, they did a good job. Then the crew comes back and they say, that lady was wonderful, she gave us, coffee and brownies and everything, so everybody's happy. I think they're very professional. We would all rather hear success stories than all have a problem with this. We want your gardening experience to be a successful one. Another thing that we offer is called a garden consultation, and Michelle and I do that. What's involved in that is we come out to your property and, for about an hour or so, kind of look around, talk about plants. Some folks say, well, I just moved here. I like this, I don't like that. I'm not sure I understand what all these plants are and their needs. We can give you the details of that if you're interested. But anytime that we're here, somebody's here to help you. This is not, we're going to say, well, I don't know, I work in the paint department. We're here, we're about plants. And we're about plants that are going to do well here. And we want you, I like nothing better to come in and hear a good success story. One of my favorite hydrangea stories was, I think I was in Safeway. This lady came up to me, and I thought she looked kind of familiar, and she said, Doug, she didn't remember my name. She said, Doug, you helped me pick out a hydrangea, and you taught me how to take care of it, and now it's doing really well. And so, I said, thank you for sharing that, and thanks for making my day, because that's really what we're about here. I'd love to hear more stories like that. And so,
Doug, a question came in, said, are the plants and the recommendations you do, does that also work in Dewey online if they're asking?
Do I need to repeat it?
Okay. Just go yes.
Yes. Basically,
the answer is yes.
Everything that between even Mayor and Skull Valley, Halden, we're all pretty close to the same. Some of us have a few more elements than others. She has a little bit more heat. He has a little bit more wind. So, it just kind of depends on where you're at. But it's all doable. It's all doable. So, with that, we're going to close this.
Do you guys have like a newsletter, an email newsletter?
Absolutely. Her question was about an email newsletter. The sign-up sheet that we just sent around will get you on that list. So you'll receive those weekly from us.
Do we know where the clipboard is right now? Has it been around, everyone? No. You should have said, you. Send it down. That's good.
So the newsletter comes out. Ken writes articles. It'll go over whatever class we had the week before. So,
Shipments, things like that.
well, the shipments will be coming in regularly. So, if you're looking for something, just stop by, give us a call. We can let you know when it kind of comes in. But we're ready. I mean, we're full blown, ready to go. So we're just waiting for spring to show up. Or we're not even going to wait for spring to show up.
It's here.
We're just gonna do it.
Another thing about classes, if you miss a class that you wish you could have attended, they're all on YouTube videos, and you can look at them. They're archived. We have hundreds of classes, so you can look up fruit trees, vegetable gardening, you name it. There's probably a subject there. I was reviewing a couple old classes this morning to sort of brush up and refresh my memory about what we discussed in the Newcomers class. And I was impressed with the instructor, probably.